The morning my husband stopped talking to me in a hospital hallway, I still thought we were the kind of couple people admired. That's the part that gets me even now. Not the silence itself, but how sure I was, right up until the second it started, that nothing was actually wrong. My name is Dana Whitfield. I'm 33. I work as a physical therapist at a clinic outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of job where you spend all day telling people their bodies can heal if they're just patient with themselves. I used to believe that applied to marriages too. Patience, time, the right kind of care. I'd been married to Mark for 6 years. Good years mostly. Not flashy, not the kind you'd put on a highlight reel, but steady. He worked in insurance claims, came home at 5:30 like clockwork, coached our nephew's little league team on weekends. He wasn't a man who kept secrets, or so I would have sworn on anything that mattered to me. His mother, Carol, had been sick for a while. Not dramatically sick, just the slow kind that comes with being 68 and stubborn about doctors. High blood pressure she ignored, a knee she refused to get looked at, the occasional dizzy spell she'd blame on skipping breakfast. Mark checked on her every few days. That was normal. That was just Mark being Mark, the good son, the one who showed up. So when his phone rang that Tuesday morning, while we were still getting ready for work, and I heard him say, "I'm coming, don't move, just breathe," I didn't think twice. I told him to go. I told him I'd finish up some paperwork at the clinic and meet him there once I had a break between patients. I got to St. Anne's a little after 11. I remember the smell of the place, that particular hospital smell of hand sanitizer and old coffee. And I remember feeling calm walking in because Mark had texted an hour earlier saying Carol was stable, just some tests, nothing to panic about. I wasn't panicking. I was just a wife showing up to support her husband, the way I always had. I found the right floor, the right hallway, and I saw him before he saw me. He was standing close to a curtained bay near the nurse's station, leaning in, his hand on his mother's arm, talking low and fast in a way I didn't recognize. Carol was gripping his wrist with both hands, and there was something in her face I'd never seen before. Not from the illness, but from whatever they were saying to each other. I almost called out. I almost just walked up and said, "Hey, how's she doing?" the way I would have on any other day. But something made me stop instead. Something in the way they went quiet, both of them, at exactly the same moment. The moment they saw me standing there. I want to be honest about that first second because it matters. Mark didn't look guilty exactly. Guilty would have almost been easier to name. What I saw on his face was something closer to caught, like a man who'd been mid-sentence in a conversation he never meant for me to walk in on. "Dana." He said my name like he was testing whether I'd actually heard anything. "Hey, I didn't think you'd get here this fast. I told you I'd come on my break." I looked past him at Carol, who had let go of his wrist and was now smoothing the hospital blanket over her knees with both hands, not looking at me at all. "How is she? What did the test say?" "They're still running some of them," Mark said. "Nothing conclusive yet." It was a normal answer. Nothing about it should have bothered me. But there was a beat, just a half second, where his eyes flicked to his mother before he answered, like he was checking with her first, and that was the part I couldn't shake. In 6 years of marriage, I had never once seen my husband check with anyone before he spoke to me. Carol finally looked up. "Dana, honey, you didn't need to rush over. I'm fine, really. It's nothing." Her voice was warm, the way it always was with me, but her hands were still moving over that blanket like she needed something to do with them. I pulled a chair closer and sat down, mostly because I didn't know what else to do with my body in that moment. I asked the ordinary questions. Blood pressure, medication, what the doctor had said so far. Mark answered most of them, quick and clipped, the way you answer when you want a conversation to end rather than continue. Carol added small details here and there, but she kept glancing at Mark first, like she was waiting for permission to say more, or maybe waiting for him to say something else entirely. A nurse came in to check vitals, and for a few minutes, the room filled with the ordinary business of blood pressure cuffs and clipped questions about pain levels. And I let myself believe I'd imagined the whole thing. That's what you do, I think, when the alternative is too uncomfortable to sit with. You talk yourself back down. Then the nurse left, and there was a silence that stretched a beat too long. And I said, without really planning to, "What were you two talking about before I walked in?" Mark's jaw shifted, just slightly. "Nothing, just going over what the doctor said. You went quiet the second you saw me. Dana, don't do this here." His voice had an edge I'd never heard him use with me in a hospital room. Low and tight, like I was the one causing a scene instead of asking a question. Carol reached over and patted my hand, her rings cool against my skin. "It's nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Family things. Old things." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes the way her smiles usually did. And behind her, I watched my husband's shoulders drop with something that looked unmistakably like relief. Relief that his mother had answered for him. That was the moment I understood, sitting in that stiff vinyl chair under fluorescent lights, that whatever I'd walked in on wasn't over. It had only been paused. The rest of that day passed in the strange, muted way days do when you're pretending everything is normal for everyone else's sake. Carol was kept overnight for observation explanation. Something about her blood pressure numbers not settling the way the doctors wanted. Mark stayed with her until visiting hours ended, and I went home alone, telling myself I'd get answers once we were both out of that hospital and back in a place that felt like ours. He didn't come home until almost 11. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still in my scrubs, when I heard his key in the door. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "She's stable," he said, before I'd even ask. "They want to keep her one more night just to be safe." "Okay," I said. "Mark, I need you to tell me what was going on in that room." He sat down across from me, rubbing his hands over his face. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, and I let the silence sit there because I'd learned enough about people, about bodies under stress, to know that pushing too hard, too fast, usually just makes someone close up tighter. "It's about the house," he finally said. "My mom's house." I waited. "She wants to sell it. She's been talking about it for months, moving into something smaller, one of those senior communities near my sister. And she wanted me to handle it quietly without telling you yet because..." He stopped. "Because why, Mark?" "Because there's money involved that she wants to give us, a significant amount, and she didn't want it to feel like it was coming with strings, or like we'd been expecting it, or..." He shook his head. "She wanted to figure out the details before she said anything to anyone, including you." I sat with that for a moment, turning it over, looking for the crack in it, because something about the explanation felt smoothed over, like a story that had been practiced rather than lived. "So why did you both go quiet the second I walked in? If it's just about money and timing, why did it look like I'd caught you doing something wrong?" "Because my mom gets embarrassed talking about money in front of people. You know how she is. She's never been embarrassed talking about money in front of me before." Mark didn't answer that. He just looked down at the table, and I watched his thumb trace the same groove in the wood grain over and over, a habit I recognized from every difficult conversation we'd had in 6 years. The ones about his father's death, about the miscarriage 2 years back, about anything that touched the parts of himself he kept locked down tight. "There's something else," he said quietly, "but I can't tell you yet, not until I talk to her again. Please, Dana, I just need a few more days." I looked at my husband, a man I had trusted completely for 6 years, asking me to sit in the dark a little longer, and I felt something shift inside me that I couldn't yet name. Not anger exactly, something quieter and more permanent than anger. "Okay," I said, "a few days," but I didn't mean it the way he thought I did. I didn't confront him again that week. Instead, I did something I'd never done in 6 years of marriage. I called Carol myself 2 days after she was discharged and asked if I could come by on my lunch break, just the two of us. She opened the door, looking more like herself, color back in her face, and something in her expression told me she'd been expecting this visit before I even said why I'd come. "I owe you an explanation," she said, before I'd even sat down, "and I owe Mark an apology for putting him in the middle of it." We sat in her kitchen, the one with the yellow curtains Mark had told me she'd sewn herself 30 years ago, and she told me the truth in a way that made every piece finally fit. It wasn't just about selling the house or the money, though both of those were real. It was about her late husband, Mark's father, and a savings account he'd kept separate for years without her full knowledge. One he'd built quietly and left to her when he passed. Carol had spent 3 years afraid to touch it, afraid of what it meant, afraid of decisions she didn't feel ready to make alone. She'd finally decided to sell the house, split part of that money between Mark and his sister, and use the rest to move somewhere smaller. But there was something harder underneath all of it. She'd asked Mark, in that hospital room, to help her write a letter to me. An apology, of all things, for the years right after our miscarriage when she'd said things about trying again soon that had cut deeper than she'd ever realized and had never found the courage to take back. "I didn't want you finding out about the letter before I'd actually written it," she said, her eyes wet. "I wanted it to be something you received whole, not something you caught pieces of in a hospital hallway." Mark was trying to protect that. He wasn't hiding anything ugly from you, Dana. He was protecting something I wasn't ready to give you yet. I sat there for a long moment, feeling 6 years of careful, quiet marriage settle differently in my chest. Not broken, just more human than I'd let myself see it as. That night, I told Mark I'd spoken to his mother. He looked at me carefully, bracing, I think, for anger I didn't have anymore. "You should have just told me," I said. "Not the whole thing, just that it wasn't something I needed to be afraid of." "I know," he said. "I didn't want you carrying it before you had to. I thought I was protecting you. I forgot that not telling you anything felt worse than telling you something hard." We didn't fix everything that night, not all at once. But we talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in longer than either of us wanted to admit. A week later, Carol's letter arrived in the mail. Handwritten, honest, imperfect in all the ways real apologies are. I keep it in the drawer of my nightstand now, not because I need to reread it, but because it reminds me of something I learned in that hospital hallway. Silence isn't always betrayal. Sometimes it's just someone trying, clumsily, to carry something heavy for you a little longer than they should have. I just wish he'd let me help carry it sooner.